This is the village of Morotinu de Sus in southern Romania, a place where old customs, old superstitions, and old vampires die hard. In the spring of 2004, something happened in this village that was as chilling as any Gothic novel or horror movie. When a young woman took ill here after a relative's death, villagers suspected her illness was being caused by the dead man from his grave. He had, some believed, become a vampire.
It's similar to the devil, as if the evil spirits have taken over the dead person.
In the dead of night, several villagers went to the local cemetery to carry out a gruesome remedy.
They did it in secret. Nobody was supposed to know. They did it at midnight. They unearthed the corpse, cut the heart out, burnt it and mixed it with water, and let the ill person drink from this water.
It was a modern-day vampire slaying, with echoes of an earlier time.
Some people say the moment they did that, they got well.
Much of today's vampire scene is about lifestyle, role-playing, and fantasies. But centuries ago, when vampire lore took hold in Europe, it was real and it was serious.
Stories about vampires originated in Eastern Europe because this was one of the poorest, least educated sections of Europe at the time.
People back then didn't know about how disease was transmitted. They couldn't explain natural disasters very well. All of these things were blamed on the restless dead.
From death and disease to a loaf of bread that didn't turn out right, vampires were blamed for just about anything. And just about anyone could become a vampire.
If you drowned, you would automatically become a vampire after death. Or if you had a violent, unexpected accident. If you committed suicide. If your corpse wasn't handled properly. If an epidemic ran through a village and people died, they too would become vampires. So as you might imagine, in some villages they got very busy digging up corpses.
And if a coffin revealed a bloated, decaying, bloody body, it would confirm their suspicions. A vampire had been found.
If they dug somebody up or they came across a decomposing body and they saw this fluid coming out of the mouth, it looked as if it was somebody who had just had blood. People being afraid of vampires coming up out of their graves at night to ravage people or drink their blood. Really came out of what a corpse looked like.
But vampires were not only found in graveyards. Perhaps the most terrifying of all were cases of the walking dead. And the reality behind the lore is every bit as creepy. In an era long before the marvels of modern medicine, sick people, thought to be dead, were literally buried alive.
Uncle so-and-so had been buried prematurely, and they had thought he was dead, and he wasn't dead, and they'd put him down 2 or 3 feet, and he had clawed his way out and come back to the village. And the villagers, of course, added 2 and 2 together and figured he was a vampire, and got the wooden stake and took care of him once and for all.
In the 1700s, vampire sightings were so common in Europe, governments were moved to action. In Austria, Empress Maria Theresa set up an official investigation, and real-life vampire hunters were dispatched with all the familiar tools of their trade, just like the fictional Van Helsing.
This weird tale of the living dead who rise from the grave at night to prey on unsuspecting victims.
It may seem like a cliche from a Hollywood movie. Garlic and crosses to keep a vampire at bay. A wooden stake to drive through his heart. But the real script was written hundreds of years ago in European vampire lore.
Keep a vampire in its grave, because that was the idea, to pin it to the ground so it would decompose and would not come back in this unnatural state. So the wooden stake would be driven through the heart of the vampire, would pin him into the ground, and then hopefully he would disintegrate into dust.
Romania, the stomping grounds for so many vampires, real and imagined, is today a modern nation poised to join the European Union. But drive a few hours from the capital city, Bucharest, and you'll find that you've traveled back in time to places where small groups of believers still cling to local vampire lore.
When someone dies and they want to follow the tradition, they call on me.
In the village of Chelaru, just a stone's throw from the suspected vampire attack in 2004, Maria Dragomir prepares special pillows to place under the heads of the dead. Filled with bits of food, soap, and mirrors, they're meant to keep the dearly departed satisfied in their coffins, so they have no desire to return to haunt the land of the living.
It is so that the person who dies would not become a vampire.
It's a tradition that may seem bizarre in a modern world, but this, after all, is just down the road from Transylvania, home base of Dracula himself, where you can still find people who say, when it comes to real vampires, it's better to be safe than sorry.